You're lucky tonight, Dan. Well, it's so awesome for me to be here because 2 years ago, I had just gotten done with a special session, and I'd started my campaign for Attorney General, and this was one of the first places I came. And I didn't know anybody in the audience, and what's awesome for me today is that I can look out at this audience and I know a lot of you. And so thank you all for the support in my campaign, for what I've done as AG, and for all the issues that I have going on. I really appreciate your support, your prayers, and your belief in me. God bless you all for what you do for this state. I always like to, I'm a family guy, so I always like to talk about my wife, and Kay Goolsbee can tell you, and actually Governor Perry, you can kind of hear him say this. He met my wife the first time and he said, you know, Paxton, he actually called me Kenny. He said, Kenny, you over-married. So, doesn't that sound like Perry? And my wife is really smart. She's got a great voice, which Kay will tell you is true. And she's kind of funny. She told me at one point that she was the Fifth Circuit, and they held our abortion restrictions related to ambulatory standards for surgical centers for abortion, and also the distance restrictions. And so far we've been extremely successful defending the very bill that Dan Patrick and I stood on the floor and passed. So that's been very exciting. Also, just in my first week, we argued the marriage case in the Fifth Circuit, and we continued to fight that in the state until the Supreme Court made their rulings, which was extremely unfortunate. But since that time, we've focused on religious liberty issues, and in this session, we focused on a pastor protection bill that would protect churches and pastors from religious discrimination. It was a great bill. And I would just say we need to do more. When our next legislative session occurs, we definitely need to protect adoption agencies. We need to protect individuals and businesses from religious discrimination. It's definitely an area that we're going to be fighting in for years, and I'm hopeful that in the next legislative session we will really focus on some of those issues. You also might have remembered that our governor used to say he would get up, come into the office, sue the Obama administration, and go home. Well, that tradition is not in danger of going away. We just filed recently, this summer, we filed a case against the federal government, the Obama administration, on waters. It's called WOTUS, Waters of the U.S. We're literally, yes, if you know what this is, literally the federal government is trying to take over not just navigable waters, but parts of land. If there's a puddle on your property, they want to control it, which means not just control the water, but control what happens on that property, which might be drilling, it might be any other business, and basically force us to go to them to get permission to use our own land. That's what we're fighting right now.
Thank you.
And we're not done with that. We've got another one that will be coming shortly when the government publishes their final rules on carbon emissions, where they're going to try to control our power plants, both new and existing, to shut down many of our power plants, which will drive up the cost of electricity and make it harder for us to bring jobs to Texas, and really harder for us to bring jobs to the United States. That'll be our next fight. It's coming soon, a coming attraction. So look for that one. Dan Patrick and I also had the opportunity to pass a little bill that you might be familiar with called voter ID. Dan and I apparently are not smart enough to understand why this is controversial. But apparently it is, and we've argued that in the Fifth Circuit. We've been relatively successful. We have a further fight in the district court, so be watching as we fight that over the next few months. We're very hopeful that we can win on that and continue requiring that people show up at voting with their photo ID. And finally, immigration. About a year ago, November, the administration, President Obama, after saying for 6 years that he didn't have the authority to change immigration law, and he said it almost 30 times, and he said he didn't have the authority, that was Congress' authority, that he was not a king, that he could not wave his magic wand. And then in November of 2014, suddenly he found the magic wand, and he changed the law. And so Abbott, as he walked out the door, filed a lawsuit, and he left me all the work. But I appreciate that. It's been a remarkable journey. We were successful in the district court arguing that the president does not have the authority to do this. This is outside of his constitutional authority. This is going to be a long battle, but so far we've argued in the Fifth Circuit, and we're waiting to hear what they think about our preliminary injunction that we got, stopping this from going not just into effect in Texas, but across the entire nation. And so, one of the things that I said here 2 years ago is that I thought by the time I was in office 6 months, Obama would know my name. I think he does. So, I don't normally like to read things, but my wife actually sent this to me, and I just wanted to read a little excerpt of an article that she found. You all remember Edmund Burke, this passage that he cites, a little quote, and I want you to finish it as I started. I'll tell you when to do it. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men. You all know it. So let me just read a little of this article. It says, yes, there is a time when good men and women must stand up for what's right, even when it involves risk. But that moment comes only after evil has already been well established and is powerfully on the move. Fighting evil may be an essential thing, but it isn't the first problem. It matters only after thousands or millions of mistakes have already been made. And if those mistakes had not been made, great fights against evil wouldn't be necessary. People end up supporting evil because they don't want to make up their minds at all. They want to avoid criticism and vulnerability. So they hold to the middle of the pack and avoid all risk. Note this, people think of murder, lying, and robbery as sins, but none of those has nearly the death toll of obedience. Basically, decent men and women obey agents of evil for very mundane reasons. The process often goes like this. Number one, being confused and intimidated, they look for the center of the pack. 2, they try not to make waves. 3, they learn that they can avoid making waves best if they adopt the perspective of their leaders. So they run the leaders' slogans through their minds as a default program. In the end, these people don't make up their minds. Rather, they take on the minds of their leaders and do their will. And so, the vast majority of evil done on earth traces back to minds and wills that have been abandoned to fear and laid on the altar of obedience. So, this is what the famous quote should say. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to obey the wrong people. And what I want to say today is, the reason I think the Tea Party and what you all have done here is so successful is because you understand what I just read. But so much of our culture and so much of our country does not. And so I just want to thank you all for caring about the right things, for fighting for liberty, and for actually believing that the Constitution still matters. God bless the Kingwood Tea Party for what you've done for our state. Thank you very much.